All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Excited to host today's session. We've got a lot that we're going to be covering today, and really the focus is going to be some of the long-term care solutions that we have available inside of the Health Markets portfolio. We're also going to be touching on the disability options that are available. And I really think, we've been talking through over the last number of weeks what the progression of the sales cycle should be like with a client. And a big part of this is we don't want to just be transactional in selling them health insurance and supplemental insurance and life insurance and moving on. We want to really work to develop a relationship with these consumers that we're serving. And I really feel like talking about things like long-term care insurance and disability insurance is kind of the next level. These are products that can certainly be used and brought up when we're in a setting where we're doing a policy review or things of that nature. There's a variety of ways that these products can actually be, brought up and the subject can be broached. But before we jump into the true content of today, I had a couple of updates that I wanted to deliver. I'm excited to announce that we are going to be announcing next week who our new CRM vendor is. And so I would really encourage you guys next Tuesday on the ADT session. I'm going to have some content and some information that I can deliver to you to give you a glimpse of what's coming over the next 60 to 90 days as we roll out our new CRM vendor. I have had several people say that just the capabilities that we're going to have with our new vendor are going to be, somebody said 100 times what we have today. I'll go with 10 times what we have today. It's just going to be vastly, vastly increased. And so I'm excited to announce that next Tuesday. I am going to be moving next Tuesday's agent development training from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. I rarely do that. I don't like doing that. But I have a demo with the new CRM vendor and our TVP group from 9:30 to 10:30. And so I don't want to miss that. So I'm just going to ask you guys if we can move this to 11 o'clock next week. And I'll give you guys a glimpse of what's going on this particular session from a CRM vendor perspective. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time next week talking about compensation, financials, and reports. I feel like this is one of the most impactful ADT sessions. We try to do this a couple times a year because I want to teach you and show you where you can access and track your commissions, what reports are most important, and how you can really begin to understand how you're compensated. One of my early mentors in the business told me that when you're in a sales role like we are, there's two rules. And the two rules are know your compensation and work your compensation. And so hopefully next week we can really help you guys better understand things. I'll tell you, it doesn't do a lot of good for us to talk about compensation and reports until you have something in the system, as far as some business that you have written. But once you start to get some business in the system, you want to be able to understand how to track that business, how to reconcile, make sure you're getting paid appropriately, all those types of things. And so we'll really do a deep dive next week into a lot of the reports that are available and kind of how I would suggest that you use those. So again, 11 o'clock next week, not 10 o'clock. I'm going to get out a reminder, and I'll try to send a couple of reminders between now and then, just to remind everybody that it will actually be 11 o'clock. So I'm going to pivot now because we've got a lot to cover when it comes to long-term care solutions and disability insurance solutions. I will tell you, the core of what we do, everything is anchored in a good health insurance or good Medicare product. We obviously know that there are gaps and holes in those products, and so we fill those gaps and holes with supplemental insurance. And then life insurance is just a natural progression of that conversation. So those are all things that I think we know to be true. I would encourage you to continue to focus on those because those are the core. And when I think about the amount of business, 90+% of our business that's written is health insurance, Medicare, supplemental, and life insurance. But we have some of these auxiliary products, which are very real needs that our clients have. And I would say one of the biggest ones, especially when we're working with people that are in their 50s and 60s, those are probably the sweet spots for this, is specifically long-term care insurance. And just so you kind of understand, when we talk about long-term care insurance, we're specifically talking about the costs related to nursing home, assisted living, and in-home health care. Those are kind of the three buckets of cost that we're talking about when we speak about long-term care. Unfortunately, Medicare was never priced or designed to cover nursing home, assisted living, or in-home health care. For those of you who are selling Medicare and those of you that will get into Medicare later this year, just to kind of understand what Medicare covers. Medicare will cover up to a maximum of 100 days in a skilled nursing facility, but it has to be following a 2+ day hospitalization. So they have to be coming out of a multi-day hospitalization. The classic example is someone breaks their hip. They go in and they get a hip replacement done, and then they can't go home because they can't walk. Nobody's there to help them. So they go into a skilled nursing facility for inpatient rehab for a few days or a few weeks. That's kind of the classic example where Medicare will provide some benefits for up to 100 days. But if that hospitalization or if that long-term care goes longer than 100 days, Medicare's done paying, and the consumer becomes responsible for the cost at 100%. And this is a very, very real risk. A recent statistic that I read said that if you live to age 65, there's a 65% chance that you're going to have a long-term care need. That's pretty staggering when you think about it. 65% of the people who live to age 65 will have a long-term care need. And so I think the thing that we need to make sure that we're talking to our clients about is, do you have a plan to cover this expense? And if not, do you want to talk about building a plan for it? I know here in Northern Indiana, the average nursing home cost is $7,000 to $9,000 a month. That's the average. God forbid you get put in, an Alzheimer's unit or a dementia unit where they have lockdown and you can't get out. Oftentimes those can run $15,000, $17,000, $18,000 per month. And just so you understand how it works is if someone does not have insurance to cover that kind of an expense, when that happens, that person has to deplete their resources and their assets. So virtually all of their resources and assets will be spent down paying for that expense. And when they get down to, I think the number is about $2,500 left, then the state low-income Medicaid program will step in and begin paying the cost. Now, I will tell you, for anybody who's ever worked with Medicaid, when it comes to nursing care, nursing home care, when you go into the Medicaid system, they may be covering the cost, but you lose choice. You don't get to pick what facility you're in. And oftentimes some of these Medicaid facilities are truly horrific places to spend the last weeks or months or years of your life. You also have very little control over where they place you. Because when you think about it, I think they have to place you within 70 miles of your home zip code. But you think about a husband and wife later in life who spend down their resources and assets and both have nursing home care, they could be drastically different locations a long way apart later in life. I think there's also a very real problem for the people who are turning 65 today. As you guys know, there's 12,000 people a day turning 65. Over the next 6 years, that's going to double to 24,000 people a day turning 65, and then it's going to plateau for a decade. And I think, when you start thinking about the realities of what does this look like 20 or 30 years from now, when all of these people need long-term care, I don't think the states are prepared for it. I don't think we're prepared for it as a country. It's kind of interesting because you start thinking about how are the state low-income Medicaid programs going to be the backdrop or the safety net for all these people who are not planning for that and will have no assets left and will be relying on the states. I think the states are concerned about that. A number of years ago, I actually saw, it was actually during a football game that I was watching, I saw an ad for long-term care and the need for long-term care insurance on television. I'd never seen an ad like that before. And it was really interesting as I looked at it because I thought, well, it wasn't mentioning any company. It wasn't like, a specific carrier. Mutual of Omaha was not promoting this particular ad. And when it got down to the very end of the ad, the entity that was paying for that ad was the state of Indiana. So the state of Indiana was running ads promoting that you need to buy long-term care insurance. And I know a lot of these states are trying to figure out how this works. Last I heard, there were 17 states that have legislation in process around forcing people to buy long-term care insurance earlier in life, or potentially having a tax penalty. I think the state of Washington is the only state that's actually passed something. But you start thinking about it from a financial perspective, how in the world are the states going to handle all of these people that need long-term care as they age in and this baby boomer generation continues to, work towards that particular need? And so when I'm talking to people about Medicare and they're turning 65 today, I'm telling them you have a uniquely different need and a uniquely different problem than anybody has ever had before you, right? Today, I talk to people who they say, well, my mom actually is on Medicaid and she actually got into a very nice nursing home. And I think that's true today. Many of these nursing homes have a certain percentage of their beds allocated for Medicaid patients. The others are private pay or, insurance paying. But by the time the people who are turning 65 today reach that point, there's going to be no beds left in the nice facilities. And who knows what this is going to look like. I read an article a couple of years ago, and it was actually about a real estate developer who is building hotels today. And they were intentionally building these hotels with wider doorways and wider hallways and elevators and things that they might not have otherwise had, because they were planning to use these facilities for long-term care 20 or 30 years down the road once they did kind of, exhausted their usefulness as a hotel. So there are people thinking about this and planning for it, but I don't think anybody is really doing enough. And I think this is something that we need to help our clients prepare for. I will say, I don't think, and I tell my clients this, I don't think everybody needs to buy long-term care insurance. I don't push my clients to buy long-term care insurance. What I do push my clients to do is think about it and talk about it while they're still young enough and healthy enough to do something about it if they want to, right? I talk to a lot of people who are saying, I want life or long-term care insurance, or I need long-term care insurance. And the reason they want it or need it is because they see a very real need on the not too distant horizon. They see themselves or their spouse, working towards, dementia or memory loss, or they see physical things coming that they're like, I really need to get this. The problem with any form of long-term care insurance is that you have to be healthy to qualify for it. You cannot buy it after you need it. And so I think this is one of the big messages that we need to deliver to the clients that we're serving is, I'm not pushing you to buy it, but I am going to push you to talk about it and talk with your spouse or your significant other about what is your plan. If you need to be in a nursing home, how are you going to pay for it? If you need somebody to come into your home, how are you going to pay for it? If you need to be in assisted living, what's the game plan here? And you need to develop that game plan long before you think that you're actually going to need those types of products. So that's kind of a backdrop for how big I think the actual problem is. I think it's an enormous problem. The issue that I see, though, is a lot of people aren't taking action on it because for most people, it's so far downstream that they're like, well, I can kick the can down the road a little bit on this. But I think, with some education, we can maybe ramp up the urgency around some of these decisions and at least push our clients or have the conversation with them about what it looks like and what their plan is. So when we look at the broad range of long-term care insurance products that are out there, there's a lot of different types of products. And we're going to cover 3 or 4, maybe 5 different versions of long-term care insurance today, kind of at a high level. And then if you want to learn more, you're going to need to be a student of your business and dive deeper into this. We have a lot of solutions in our portfolio. I would say what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of move from least expensive to most expensive and kind of explain to you how this might work. So the least expensive solution that we have in our portfolio is something that Steve's going to cover in a couple of minutes. It's the Aetna Recovery Care product. You can go online to the carrier sites through the Resource Center, and you can go to Aetna and you can pull the Recovery Care brochures and you can read the details. Ultimately, the Recovery Care product is a short-term care type of product. It's not going to cover somebody for 3, 4, 5 years in a long-term care facility. But it does have some components to it where you can build out a 12 months worth of coverage. Ultimately, when someone purchases a long-term care product, what they're doing is they're buying a bucket of money to put as a buffer or a cushion between their assets and the nursing home, the assisted living, the in-home healthcare company, whatever that, whoever the vendor is that's delivering the service. And so when you buy long-term care insurance, it's just a matter of how big of a bucket do you want to buy. We could build a bucket that might be a $30,000 bucket, which isn't going to last very long, but it's better than nothing. We can build something that's a $300,000 bucket or a $3 million bucket, which most people could never afford. So that's when you think about long-term care insurance, think about it from that perspective, that you're buying a bucket of money to put it as a cushion between your resources and assets and whoever the vendor is, that's going to deliver the services. The Aetna long-term or the Aetna Recovery Care product, I tell my clients I can probably get you into, as long as you're healthy and in your mid to late 60s. We can probably get you into a net and a recovery care for somewhere between $80 and $150 a month per person. Depends on how we design that product. So that would be kind of the entry level option. That's going to be the least expensive, but the smallest bucket of money. The next level up would be more what's called traditional long-term care insurance. I want to talk about this particular type of product for a minute, because there has been a lot of people over the years that have purchased traditional long-term care insurance and have not had an excellent experience with it. Traditional long-term care insurance is something that you would buy from an insurance company. The way it typically works is you have an elimination period. The most common elimination period is 90 days. So what that means is that's kind of like the deductible. If you go into a nursing home, you pay for the first 90 days before the policy kicks in. And then the policy kicks in, and the consumer picks either a daily or a monthly amount that is paid out. Could be $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, $12,000. The client can pick the number. And then that policy per month, and then the policy would pay for a specified amount of months. I would tell you, I think the most common long-term care, traditional long-term care policy today would be a 90-day elimination period, $5,000 a month of benefit, and a 36-month payout time frame. So if you put the math to it, $5,000 a month times 12 months is about $60,000 a year. Times 3 years, you're buying a $180,000 bucket of money to put between your assets in the nursing home or the assisted living organization. I will tell you, though, there's some issues with this type of product. The biggest issue is that insurance companies find it very difficult to accurately price these products, because it's a product that you might be buying in your 50s or 60s and not using until your 80s or 90s. And historically, insurance companies have not calculated the numbers well. And so what we've seen is two things happen. Number one, these policies are very subject to rate increases. And we have seen over the years, people who bought traditional long-term care insurance, their rates skyrocketed through the roof, and potentially they got priced out of the product before they could ever use it. So that's one issue. The second issue I have with traditional long-term care insurance is, what if you don't have an extended end of life situation? What if you're hit by a bus or you die of a heart attack? All the money that you would have paid into that long-term care, traditional long-term care insurance product is gone into thin air, just gone if you don't use it at the end of your life. So that's something to consider with those types of products. I will tell you, really, there's one major vendor who offers traditional long-term care insurance today, and it's Mutual of Omaha. The two biggest players in this market for many years were Genworth and John Hancock, but both of them stopped selling long-term care insurance several years ago because they were so underwater on the policies that they had sold. They decided to no longer sell it. And so there's not many carriers offering this. In our portfolio, it would be Mutual of Omaha. We actually work with a third-party vendor called LTCI, and there's a gal by the name of Liz Quinn, who is their representative, and they will help you, and Liz will help you with quoting and placement and all the work that needs to be done to place a traditional long-term care policy with Mutual of Omaha. I know on our Indiana team, we had a training with Liz Quinn a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to encourage Gary and Tyler to bring Liz in for those of you in Michigan, just to do a high-level overview of traditional long-term care insurance. I will tell you, I don't sell too much traditional long-term care insurance, though, and it's for the two reasons that they can raise your rates whenever they need to and potentially price you out of it, and that there's nothing left at the end of that policy if you don't use it for long-term care. One other thing to consider about those traditional long-term care policies is that they have to be paid, the money has to be paid to a skilled caregiver. So the money is paid out, has to be paid out to a nursing home or a licensed, caregiver. It can't be paid to your grandkid or your kid or a friend who wants to come in and take care of you. So you are a little more pigeonholed as far as who those resources need to be paid to. So we've got Aetna Recovery Care, which is going to be kind of the entry-level option. We have the traditional long-term care, which is available through LTCI, and it's probably going to be Mutual of Omaha. And then we have a couple of additional products. And the additional products that we're going to talk about are more hybrid products. These products really became available as we saw traditional long-term care insurance companies pull out of the long-term care market over the last 5 to 7 years. What happened is some of the most reputable life insurance companies in the world started to come into this space and started to build products that we call hybrid products. Personally, I'm a big fan of hybrid products if somebody is willing to pay the premium. They are probably going to be the most expensive as far as the monthly or annual premium that needs to be paid in, but they also do the most and give you the most as a consumer. The way a hybrid product works is it's a combination of life insurance and long-term care insurance smashed together. And Securian Life or Minnesota Life is the premier carrier in this space, developing and selling these products. And I've sold a number of these over the last few years. Securian has two products that you can choose from. One is called their Protector. Their Protector product, it's actually a permanent life insurance product, and it's very simple in how it works. It's a permanent life insurance policy. So because the whole thing is built on a life insurance chassis, there are a couple of guarantees that you have. The first guarantee is that your price will never increase. So you'll never get priced out of this type of product. The second guarantee is as long as the premiums are paid, it'll be there till the end of your life. But the way these products actually work is that you're buying a life insurance product. So you're buying a bucket of money on a life insurance chassis, and then you can tap into that life insurance policy and pull money out to pay for long-term care expenses if and when you need it before you pass away. The first product, the Protector product, really is one single bucket of money. So for example, you might buy a $100,000 policy. That's the minimum that you can buy. I just quoted this for, I think it was a 67-year-old, and it was going to be a $100,000 policy, was going to be about, I think it was about $3,500 a year in premium. So you figure a little under $300 a month in premium for a $100,000 policy. And the way that it works is if this gentleman had a long-term care need, he can start pulling up to 4% per month out of that policy. So a $100,000 policy, you can pull $4,000 a month out of it to pay for long-term care until that money, that bucket is depleted. The other thing that's really, really nice about these products is because they're built on a life insurance chassis, if you don't have an extended end of life situation and you pass away from a heart attack or a stroke or you're hit by a bus and it ends quickly, all the money that you have in that policy is triggered through a life insurance payout, and it's triggered to be paid to your heirs on a completely tax-free basis. So these products are really interesting because they're dual purpose. And the one thing you can tell a client with these types of products is that the policy is going to pay out one way or another as long as the premiums are paid, right? It's either going to pay out in the form of a life insurance death benefit, which is a tax-free death benefit to your heirs, or you're going to burn it up while you're alive, insulating yourself against the costs related to long-term care. Now, one objection that I get from clients is they say, well, Silas, with a $100,000 policy, I'm getting $4,000 a month. And you said the average cost is $7,000 to $9,000 a month. It's not going to cover it all. And my response to that would be, yes, it's not going to cover it all, but it's going to cover a good chunk of it. If you owe $8,000 a month, but your policy is coming in and paying $4,000 of that, you only have to come up with $4,000. So it slows down the bleed on your resources, right? So I think there's still benefit in those types of products. That Protector plan is a very, very simplified hybrid product. I've sold a number of those over the years. They're kind of interesting in how they're built out too, because you can actually, you can fund them in creative ways. So one option is you can pay a monthly or annual premium for the rest of your life. Or you could go to the other end of the spectrum and you could say, I want to dump in a one-time lump sum and pay the policy up forever. I'll tell you, I've got a couple of examples I'll share with you. I had a husband and wife who were farmers, and they owned a bunch of farmland, and they were passing the farm down to their kids. They had 3 children, and their biggest concern as parents owning this land was that they would end up in a nursing home or assisted living, and they would have to start selling the land to pay for that because the government would require that before they could actually go into Medicaid. And so they each bought a policy, and they each wanted a $200,000 policy. And so we backed into the math. They had some money sitting in a savings account, and they each put in roughly $100,000. They wrote a check one time for $100,000, and dumped it into this policy. And what that did is that created for each of them a separate, and it was right around 200,000. It was slightly different because male and female and age differences and stuff, but they each basically took $100,000 and turned it into 200,000 in the form of a hybrid life insurance product. And so now they have a $200,000, each of them has a $200,000 policy. They never have to make another premium payment on it. It's guaranteed, and it's either going to pay out as a tax-free death benefit to their kids if they die before they need it, or they can start pulling out $8,000 a month, which is 4% of the 200,000. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum if somebody has idle money sitting. The other end of the spectrum, like I said, is to pay a monthly or an annual premium payment. I had another client. She was 62 years old when she bought this policy. And again, she knew she wanted a $200,000 policy. And she said, Silas, I have $50,000 sitting in savings, just kind of idle money, and I'm planning to work for the next 5 years. So what I would like to do is I would like to put in the 50,000, and then I would like to make 5 annual premium payments for X amount of dollars so that I never had to pay another premium payment on this. And so I worked with the team at Securian to come up with the math behind it. And what they did, what we ended up doing was we sold this policy. She put in 50,000 up front, and then she's putting in $8,000 a year over a 5-year time frame. So she put in 50 grand up front. She's going to fund another 40,000 over 5 years. So her total input is 90,000. And then she's guaranteed to have a $200,000 policy that will go for the rest of her life. So there's some really cool things you can do with these policies from a funding perspective. I do think as you look at these policies, these types of hybrid products are probably uniquely different from any other product that we sell. And I tell my clients this, I say, most insurance products that I would sell you, I would put in the expense category because it's something you're paying a monthly premium for that you may never use. With these hybrid products, it's not an expense. It's simply a reallocation of your existing assets and a leveraging of your current resources. Because I can guarantee you on these policies, if you pay the premium, you will get more out of the policy than what you pay into it eventually. Because it's either going to pay out in the form of a death benefit, or you're going to burn it up while you're still alive, taking time or using it to pay for the long-term care expenses. So that's kind of the first type of hybrid product. I did see there were a couple of questions, and so I want to jump to the chat box very quickly and just see if I can answer any of these questions. Ashley, I don't know why you're upside down either. So Kate said, when you withdraw the 4% for medical needs, is that tax-free as well? Yes, it is. It comes out completely tax-free. The other cool thing about these hybrid products is that money is paid directly to the benefit, like to the owner, and they can use that money however they see fit. So it doesn't have to be paid to a skilled caregiver. Somebody could say, hey, I want to trigger the policy. It's going to start paying to me. I'm getting $4,000 a month or $8,000 a month, and I can pay whoever I want in whatever way I want. So there's a lot more flexibility with the payouts of the policy. I will mention this too, is that pretty much all long-term care policies, when we talk about long-term care policies, they have 2 triggers to be able to access the benefits. You can't just say, hey, it's time. I want to start pulling $4 grand a month. It's not your choice. There's 2 triggers though. The first trigger is the inability to do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. ADLs is what we call them. It's kind of an industry standard. The ADLs, I don't remember all of them, but it's like feeding yourself, bathing yourself, transferring yourself from a bed to a chair, dressing yourself, wiping your butt, and there's one other. But it's if a doctor certifies that you are unable to do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, it triggers the policy. The other trigger is a cognitive impairment. So if you're diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, that triggers the policy, and you can begin drawing on it too. And I would say those 2 triggers are, I think, pretty much the same for all long-term care policies that you would consider or that you would look at. So the other thing that I'll mention is with these hybrid products, when you go on claim, when you start pulling money out of the policy, you stop paying premiums in. So at that point, you're done paying premiums. So it's a really cool way to leverage existing resources and assets that you might have to protect yourself. The last product that I'm going to talk about is kind of I would say an enhanced hybrid product. It's Securian Life or Minnesota Life's it's their SecureWise product. I think it's called the SecureWise. This is a little different product because this is a product where it's a hybrid of life insurance and long-term care insurance. But what they do is they separate it into two buckets. And Kevin, yes, there are elimination periods on the hybrid products too. Most of them are 90 days. But with this last product, there's a life insurance component and a long-term care insurance component, but they're not commingled. It's two separate buckets. And they do this so that they can intentionally diminish the life insurance bucket to enhance the long-term care bucket. And so I'm in the process of working through one with a client right now where they're going to pump some money into this thing potentially. And their life insurance benefit is right at 100,000, but their long-term care benefit starts out at like 185,000. And then it has an inflationary rider on it where it's going to grow over time. And so what you're doing in those types of situations, that would be for somebody who says, I don't really need a lot of life insurance, but I like the concept and I want to diminish the life insurance benefit to enhance the long-term care benefit and have the option of putting an inflation rider on it so that that long-term care benefit actually grows and grows and grows as time goes on before I need it. Now, in that type of a situation, if someone passes away, they're not going to get this monster bucket of money. They're probably going to get the 100,000 or whatever the minimum amount of that life insurance policy is. It's not really designed so much to be a life insurance policy, although there is a life insurance payout that would typically refund their premiums, but they're not going to get like a bunch more life insurance than what they paid in premiums. It's kind of the life insurance piece is primarily designed to recoup the premiums that they paid in if they don't need it for long-term care. So that's kind of, now I will say with that type of a product, you do have to be long-term care certified. So if you're going to sell traditional long-term care insurance or the secure care product, those two products, you have to be long-term care insurance certified, which means that you have gone through an 8-hour continuing education course specific to long-term care, and the state that you live in recognizes you as LTC certified. If you're going to sell the Aetna Recovery Care, or you're going to sell the Protector, which is just the one bucket, those you don't have to be long-term care certified because those are much more, they're lesser types of products when it comes to long-term care. So you don't have to have your long-term care certification for those particular products. So this kind of gives you an idea. I would also say that secure care product, the last one we talked about, that's going to be more for higher income, higher net worth clients. The premiums actually have to be paid in. It can't be paid on for the rest of your life. I think today it's a maximum of 15 years that the premiums have to be paid up. So that's more for somebody who says, hey, I got a bucket of cash, or I want to pull a bunch of money out of investments and pump it into this policy. That's going to kind of be more high level. So again, just to remind you guys, we've got the Aetna Recovery Care, which is the more entry level. We got Mutual of Omaha through LTCI, which is going to be your traditional long-term care. Then you get into the hybrids, the Protector with Securian Minnesota Life, or the Secure Care, which is going to be the most expensive product. We'll probably deliver the largest amount of true long-term care insurance. So Cav, with that, I'm going to turn things over to you for a little bit to kind of talk through some of these products. I think that most of us probably need to understand the Aetna Recovery Care the best, because that's the one that is probably going to be most likely to be sold because it's the most affordable and can, meet the needs of many of our clients. So take it from here, my friend.
All righty. Okay, so the Aetna Recovery Care, this has been around for a while. I really like this product because it's very versatile. Some of you at meetings have heard me talk about it before with people that need it to help with their Medicare Advantage plans or Medicare supplements, but I'm going to talk about it today in terms of a long-term care alternative. Because again, the biggest thing is when most people look for long-term care, two things have happened. Number one, they either can't afford it, or number two, they can't qualify for it, because traditional long-term care is very expensive, like Silas said, and it's hard to qualify for. But this plan is something that if someone can qualify for our critical guard plan, our non-guaranteed issue critical guard, they can probably qualify for this. And so the biggest thing is, and Silas hit on some of these things, but again, when someone reaches the age of 65, they have a 70% chance of needing long-term care at some point. And the thing about this is most people don't realize what Medicare health insurance does or doesn't do. And so when you recover at a nursing facility, Medicare pays the first 20 days of skilled care only if admitted as an inpatient for at least 3 days. It does not pay for intermediate or custodial care. Assisted living facilities. Again, these things are starting to pop up everywhere. Um, and the thing about nursing facilities, as Silas touched on it, I actually have an article, but there's starting to be a nursing home shortage because we have more people living longer. There's more people on Medicare. And so nursing facilities are becoming more for the people who need that 24-hour skilled care. And what you're finding is assisted living facilities are going up everywhere, and their assisted living facilities are basically apartments with nurses in it. Okay. And so they're starting some assisted living facilities, because we dealt with this with my father-in-law. They're starting to leave rooms open for short-term care, because as more and more people are utilizing the nursing homes, there's less and less places for people to go. And a lot of people don't realize that Medicare doesn't cover anything for assisted living. And then finally, you've got home health care, where Medicare will cover that for 100 days, but it doesn't cover the custodial care, the cooking, the cleaning, if your daughter's going to help you, all that kind of stuff. So the neat thing about this product, it's totally customizable. And so you can actually get a daily living facility where it'll pay up to $400 a day. You can do a 90, 180, 270, or 360. There's waiting periods. But basically, if you can't do 2 of the 6 daily activities, or you have a cognitive impairment, this benefit will kick in. So when you think about this for a second, a $400 benefit times 360 days, that's a tax-free bucket of money of $144,000. Okay, so again, when my father-in-law went to the assisted living the last couple months of his life, it was about $5,000 a month. Well, 400 times 30, that would cover the assisted living. And then you have a home care rider where they'll pay up to $1,200 weekly if you can't do 2 of the 6. And as long as there is a professional service coming for at least 1 hour, 3 times a week, they get the full benefit. And so you can use this plan to actually pay your neighbor, your friend from church, your daughter, or the custodial care. And so this plan is very, very flexible. The other nice thing about this plan is it is an age-rated product. So once they get in, it's not going to go up as they get older like traditional long-term care does. So, and this plan starts for people at age 50. So when we sit there and look at it, I just did a quick little quote for myself. And if I did the 400 a day times 360, the 1,200 a week times 52, which is over $200,000 in payout, it's $115 a month. So it is something that it's very doable, especially as long-term care plans become harder and harder to find. This product is very, very viable for our customers. Okay. So is there any questions on the recovery care? Is there anything in the chat, Silas?
I'm just reading here.
Hey, Steve, I have a question for you, just real quick. Do you know the policy well enough to know if somebody dips into their coverage options? Let's say they have a 360 day, they go in for 6 months and then they're able to go home. Does the 360 ever reset, or are those just exhausted?
When we look at the brochure, you have lifetime maximum equal to twice the number of covered days. Now, so let's talk about this. If you just kind of go in and you have 4 months here, 3 months here, it's just going to keep adding up, and you literally have 720 days But if you have a long-term care type deal where it's consistent, as soon as you hit the 360, you're done. And the only way you can tap into that next 360 is if you go 180 days without any treatment of anything. So again, this is not going to help the person who has Alzheimer, stuff like that. But this is a great first step, because a lot of people look at that and they see, well, this isn't going to help me long term. Well, let me tell you what it will do. It'll give you some options. So the first option is I can stay home for a year. And I can pay someone to take care of me. And then when this money runs out after 52 weeks, I can now go into the nursing facility of my choice for another year. And again, if I can get it to where it's lower, because again, maybe I find someone that does home health care for $800 a week, well, that's just going to elongate the benefit. Or if I go into a facility that's only, you know, around here, it's $285 a day. So the 400 can elongate. But what you're doing, guys, is you're creating this cushion between them and their money. And if they get to the point where this is done paying, number one, even if you only use it for a year, you got way more out of this plan than you'll ever pay for it. But eventually, if it's something long-term care, then they're going to have to go into their Medicaid spend down and all that kind of stuff. But this is literally giving people a 1 to 2 year cushion so they don't have to use their money. So, but yes, so it's got 720 and then, you know, 52 weeks times 2. But if it's just continuous, you know, at that 360, it's not going to go on. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah, so basically, anytime you trigger it, there's a 180-day waiting period before the clock starts over again.
Right. Yeah, you have to recover. I mean, it's called recovery care. So, you know, this is it's an alternative to long-term care, but the biggest thing it's for, that's why it works really good with Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplements, because you can do like a 90-day window, a 13-week. But for those people who, again, can't qualify for traditional long-term care or can't afford it, this is definitely better than nothing. You know, because I look at this, if my father-in-law would have had this, it would have covered his $5,000 a month at the assisted living facility. You know, and he wouldn't have had to touch his own money. So it's like, it got Jenny and I thinking about, we're going to put this on us so our kids don't have to deal with it, because again, it's a good plan. And you can actually get more than a hybrid plan, because like I said, $400 a day times 30 days, that's more than $4,000 a month. So, and like I said, if they can qualify for our critical illness products and stuff like that, they can qualify for this one. So, Silas, any other comments on this?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then the other one you wanted me to touch base on is the Securian. Okay, so Securian term, they have what's called the Chronic Illness Conversion Agreement. This is something you can tag onto a term life plan that will give them the ability to convert this plan into the hybrid plan that Silas talked about earlier. So again, one of the reasons why I like this plan is because, you know, people got a 70% chance of needing long-term care at some point in their life. Most people, by the time they think about it, their health or their budget doesn't allow it. But with this, I can actually give someone a term life insurance plan to get them their number that they need. And as long as I can convert this by age 65, I can convert this into a hybrid plan with no health questions. So basically, this is a term, with their term life plan, you can literally get them term life insurance to take care of the income and everything. But if it gets to the point where they hit 65 and they no longer need the big life insurance, they can convert this into a hybrid if they want to, and now they've got access to long-term care type funds. This is the only plan in the market that does this right now. So again, it's a very unique product where, I'm a big believer, if you're going to sell someone term life insurance, there needs to be something on it rather than just the death benefit. Because again, industry standards say that 99% of term plans never pay a death benefit because people outlive the term. So if you can sell a living benefit, or if you can sell this chronic illness agreement, you're just giving your customers something that they can use for something else down the road. And when you talk about this with long-term care and how people are going to need this, this is a great product to show people that is going to separate you from everybody else. Instead of just showing them a death benefit, you're going to show them something that could turn into a hybrid plan down the road if they choose. Now, the premium's going to go up and stuff like that, but it's just one of those things that I like giving people options versus telling people they have no options when they really want it. So,
And I think this is, we go back to that whole idea that we've used in the past about ensuring your insurability. This is basically buying the right to be able to buy a long-term care policy down the road, even if you're sick, right? So for somebody who sees a need, but maybe doesn't want to spend the premium right now, but they have a need for life insurance overall, this type of term product, could be super helpful. So
now a place where I like to sell that plan is usually when I do the dine with people, the E is education, or I always do end of life. I like selling if someone wants educational funds on their kids, I like using this plan. So, hey, here's 250, 300, 400,000 for life insurance in case you die for your kids' education. But if they end up graduating and you're still alive, we can convert this and now it becomes a long-term care product for you. You're smiling, Silas.
I like that. I've never thought about it, but I like that because that's you're bridging two different phases of life that people have to deal with in two separate needs with one product, right?
Right. Because it's like, that's the biggest thing with term life insurance. I'm paying all this money. What if I don't use it? Well, let's do this. And that's where when you do the when we talked about policy reviews a couple weeks ago, when we did the financial snapshot part of the last page of the fact finder, is education for your kids important? Do you have any type of long-term care? No. This is a great product to show them. This is going to help with the education, but hopefully you're still alive. Now we can use it for you and you're not wasting your money.
Good stuff. So Casey said, if we get appointed with Securian, Haas asks if we're long-term care certified. If we say no, we'll still have access to this protector hybrid product. So I would tell you that when you get appointed with Securian Minnesota Life, you can quote all their products. You just can't sell the Secure Care if you don't have the long-term care certification. You can still quote everything. So it's not like whether or not you're long-term care certified diminishes your ability to see or quote products. It's just you can't sell it. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Cav, thank you for that. I don't see any other questions related to this. I know these are a lot of different things that we've covered here today. I will be sending out the recording to this so you guys can kind of sort back through it. Part of this is just beginning to understand it. And then if you want to start selling some of these products, you're going to need to do a deeper dive on these products. Every one of these products has additional training on the carrier portals and different places that you can go to read product brochures and things like that. The last thing I just want to touch on is we do have a long-term disability option available in our portfolio. And, I think it's really interesting when you think about disability insurance. People insure everything, right? I mean, people today are insuring their cell phones. They're insuring blown tires. They're insuring all kinds of crazy things. And oftentimes people are buying insurance for all these different things, but they fail to insure the single largest asset that they have, and it's their ability to make money. especially when you're talking to people in their 30s and 40s and maybe even into their 50s, their ability to generate revenue and income for their family in the working years that they have left very may be the single biggest asset that they have. It might be a bigger asset than their home when you start putting the math to it, as far as what their annual salary or income is times how many years they're planning to continue to work. And so I do think disability insurance is something worth having in your back pocket. It's something worth talking about. I don't think any of us talk about it enough. You know, we can certainly make the case for a good supplemental or critical illness or major accident policy that goes alongside their health insurance. And that's really a lump sum cash fusion that is triggered by a major event. And that'll get them through a little bit of time, potentially, maybe replace some lost income. But if that person isn't recovering and they're not able to return to work, what does that look like? And so we have a carrier in our portfolio called the Plus Group. And I'm going to share my screen here so I can just walk you through what this looks like. And I would tell you probably the best way for you to learn about this product is to run a quote on yourself. And so I'm going to actually click on the carriers tab here. Hopefully this resource center looks familiar to all of you. You click on the carriers tab, you pick the state, either Michigan or Indiana, that you're working in. You look at disability insurance, and the Plus Group of Texas comes up. The Plus Group is a third-party vendor that we actually work with, and they sell disability products in all 50 states. They have 6 or 7 different carriers that they will go out and shop for you. And it is a very, very simple way to quote disability insurance for a consumer. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out. First of all, right here is their website. And if you click here and go to their website, probably the simplest way to quote things is just to do it straight from their website. And right here, you can click on request a quote and request a disability quote online. And then this walks you through 3 different steps. First is agent information. So and you put in their information. Just making up random numbers here. Male, state of Indiana, or state is Indiana. Single, no tobacco. It asks a little bit of height and weight, so 6 foot, 210. Medications and dosages, it's good to have that information. You know, any health conditions they have going on, and then occupation, job duties, length of employment, whether or not they work from home, does they own their own business, what's their annual income, bonuses and commissions, has it been consistent, and then other information. Do they have any other information in place? You click next, there's a couple more questions, and you hit submit. And what then happens is this information is shot off to the Plus Group. They take your client's information, they go out and shop all of their carriers, and usually within 12 to 24 hours, they email you a proposal that has several different options that are available. Now, when you're buying disability insurance, it's kind of like long-term care insurance and how it's designed. And what I mean by that is you typically have an elimination period. You have the amount of money that it will pay out monthly. Typically, a disability policy cannot pay out more than 66% of your previous income. So it's going to replace about 2/3 of your income. And then you can pick, do I want it to go pay for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, to age 65, lifetime? You have the option on that. But I will tell you, whenever they quote these products, this overview quote that they send you is the best way to learn it, because it's a beautiful quote. It has all your information already highlighted on it as far as the agent. It's literally a multi-page quote that's ready to send to the client. And the neat thing about it is usually on the second page of those disability quotes, it has like a grid where it says, hey, if you go from 90-day to 180-day elimination period or a 365-day elimination period, what will it bring your price down to? If you go from a 2-year benefit period to a 5-year, 10-year, or lifetime. So it gives you all of the numbers in like a grid or a chart so that you can pull all the levers and see all the different price points. So you can look in one corner of the grid and say, okay, you know, a 365-day elimination period for 2 years is going to be the cheapest. And then go to the other and say, okay, a 90-day elimination period or a 30-day elimination period, maybe that pays for lifetime is going to be X. And so it gives you that range as far as what the cost is. I'll tell you, as I've run these quotes for clients over the years, I've always been surprised by how affordable it is for them to have disability insurance in place. And, you know, I think about both long-term care and disability insurance. You know, these are covering two different types of instances, but these are conversations that can continue to help you build that relationship with the client that you're serving. These are two products that a lot of people, you know, may procrastinate on a little bit. They need to think about. But I do think the sales that I've gotten in both of these product lines, they've happened because I've developed a relationship with the client and I brought it up several times before they decided to buy in and make the investment and ensure those particular events. I think when we look at all of the different things that we could help our clients protect themselves from, that long-term care piece for people, you know, who might be a little bit older, and the disability piece for people that are a little bit younger are two things that we should at least have on our radar. And I think with the tools and the products we have available, we've got tremendous options, and it's not difficult to run these kinds of quotes. So I think the first thing you should do is go in through there and run a quote on yourself. See how much would disability insurance cost for you. That's a great first way to do it and kind of get familiar. I think the gal who runs most of the quotes with the Plus Group is one of the lead gals there is Shondi Philby. I've known her for 20 years. She used to be an employee of ours and she transitioned over to the Plus Group many, many years ago. She's great. For those of you who are in Indiana, I am going to have a representative from the Plus Group coming in this Friday in our sales team meeting and doing a little bit deeper dive on some of the products and some of the ways that you can position these products as well. I'll encourage Gary and Tyler to, you know, get her into your meetings as well. So again, today was really just kind of some of these auxiliary products that maybe we don't sell the first time we sit down with a client. But I first of all wanted you to know that they're in our portfolio. And second of all, just give you some talking points and maybe some basic understanding and overview of them. I think if you're going to take this to the next level, you've got to be a student of your business. You've got to go into the carrier pages and you've got to begin to study these products a little bit so that you actually know what you're talking about. Obviously, Sandra, Cav, myself, your sales leaders are willing to help you. The carrier reps are willing to help with all of this too. You know, I think about Aetna. Aetna has great carrier reps that will help us with recovery care. Securian Minnesota Life, they've got reps that will help us as well. LTCI, Liz Quinn's great there. And then the Plus Group has, you know, representatives that'll help you every step of the way as far as understanding the product, building out a quote, and then, you know, delivering it and helping with the application and enrollment side of things. So we have a lot of resources. It's just a matter of kind of developing that basic understanding and being a student of your business. So I know we're up against the top of the hour. Before we wrap things up, I'll just remind you guys again, next week's session is going to be from 11 to 12 instead of from 10 to 11. I'll be delivering information on our new CRM, and I'm also going to be talking through compensation financials and reports. And so I think that'll be a really, really good session. I hope you're all able to tune in. I don't see anything else in the chat box, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up today. Appreciate y'all being here. Enjoy the beautiful weather, and I hope you all have a great week. Take care.